Hello, Lightworkers, and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a spiritual conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. I'm your host, Megan Rounds, spiritual connector, energist, healer, and founder of Mystical Mashup. Welcome to today's show. Today's guest is a fourth-generation Arizonan with natural red hair and a preference for SPF 100 sunblock. Sass and sarcasm are her love languages, along with nature, camping, baking, sewing, or any kind of craft project. In the Muggle world, she is an administrative assistant and registrar for a special education school. She has been married for going on 23 years and is a mom to two boys aged 21 and 18, a 15-year-old daughter, a rescue pup named Maisie, who is a mixture of hurricane-like energy and a giant ball of love, and a 7-year-old black and white cat named Millie, who has been like a grumpy old lady since she was a kitten. I really want to meet her. She is fascinated by all things metaphysical and is an intuitive channel, empath, medium, and a Reiki practitioner with clairsentient as well as clairaudient and clairvoyant abilities. Her gig on the side is a spiritually guided life where she helps others find the light within themselves and live more spiritually guided lives. She cherishes the friendships she's made over her almost 3 years here in the Lightworkers Lab and spends most of her time here in the main lab where she is a moderator and also hosts the weekly program Guided by Spirit every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Please give a warm Lightworkers welcome to Amy Crandall. Whoo, there you are, Amy. Hello.
Hi, hello.
Welcome to today's show, and thank you so much for being here. I just tried to combine all of that into one sentence. Can you tell?
Words are hard, but thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, yeah, it's so great to have you. And I know we talked a little bit the other day, which was really fun and exciting. I guarantee those of you watching that what we talked about was not the things we'll talk about today, but just, it was really nice to get to know you then, and I'm excited for everybody to have a chance to get to know you here today. What I like to do is start out with a really general request slash question to share with us your spiritual journey and how did you find your way into the lab. So the lab part is important, but the spiritual journey, that's going to span a lot longer, and you can start anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be at the beginning or at the end. It can be wherever, and we'll just meander around and go from there.
Okay, well, my spiritual journey is words.
I know.
Words are hard. I think there's some truth to what you shared about that communication issues there. But my spiritual journey, as I look back on it, I've really had experiences my whole life, but didn't have the vocabulary or the knowledge to describe what was happening. But my dad passed almost 5 years ago, and after that, it was a sudden awakening. Like I was having different experiences that I couldn't dismiss anymore. I couldn't, chalk off as coincidence or maybe these were happening. And that really led me on a journey of searching for knowledge, searching how these things worked for me to understand what was going on, because I didn't have the words for them. My only reference was things you see on television. And
Yikes.
So, yeah, I've been drawn to the spiritual world, the metaphysical world forever. I've been fascinated by it, but really it was with the passing of my father. And as I look back on it, I think it's because I was more open to receiving that spirit communication, because I wanted, this is going to make me cry. I wanted to hear from him. So I was more open to these things happening, which is why I feel like that event in itself kind of opened all these things up for me.
Sure.
But I really spent, probably it was about a good year before I found my way to the lab, Googling different videos, watching different YouTube videos, reading every blog article I could find. But it was in those YouTube videos that I found the beautiful Crystal Ann Compton, and the way she speaks, the way she would teach, it really, first off, it caught my attention, but it really resonated with my heart. I could feel it in my heart, like the truth of her words. And I want to say probably 3 to 6 months after I found her videos that she started announcing the Lightworkers Lab and that it was an open community and encouraged people to join. And that's how I found my way to the lab, was through her videos on YouTube.
Do you by chance remember the video that, like, was there a video in there that really stood out to you, that kind of got you hooked on the others?
She had a couple of them, because some of these experiences were newer to me. I really, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but I would often discount that these weren't really happening, or you don't really have this ability within you, like you're just making it up kind of deal. That was my experience. That was just, you would talk yourself out of it. And one of them was like signs you are a medium, or one of them, and I know we all have this question, is about like, what's my soul's purpose, or why am I here? And there's one of them, I'm going to see if I can find it, but I can't remember the title, but it was talking about your soul's purpose and your soul's journey. And like, those things that are meant for you will set your heart on fire. And just the way she described it is like, oh, I just felt so connected to those words that it really helped open me up to the possibility of saying, yes, these are things that are happening, not to me, but for me. And realizing that there was a greater purpose to these things that were going on, to help open up my understanding for them. But those are two of the main ones that stick out. I mean, over the last few years, I've watched several, but those are the two like beginner ones for me.
Oh, yeah. Well, I like to know those things. And then if you're able to find it, great. I will search for a couple of those too and see if we can add those to the links in the comments section after the show so that people can, who are interested can check those out. I love how you made the distinction that things aren't happening to, but for you. That's so important. And I know that, if you don't mind my exposing, you're a Gemini as well. Words really mean a lot. So it totally resonates with me. But I don't want to interrupt your story. So I am curious, though, about the experiences you had following your dad's passing that you weren't able to ignore, if you're comfortable sharing those. And if you're not, that's okay.
Sure, that's totally fine. It actually started happening about a week before he actually passed away. Stuff was getting knocked over in my bedroom. Electronics were going kind of crazy. And I just got this overwhelming, first off, it wasn't scary to me. I just got this sense of overwhelming peace. And this can make me emotional. This is the struggle of an empath, y'all. Emotions just come to service. You can't help but feel them. But there was this overwhelming sense of peace that there was people coming to visit and prepare us for his passing. And that in itself was such a blessing to me, to be able to feel that sense of peace and knowing that all was happening as it should. But I started getting, my dreams were becoming more vivid. I was getting visitors in my dreams, that family members that had passed several years previous that I hadn't previously dreamt of. But like I said, that all started about a week before he passed. And that kind of continued after he was gone. And, as anybody that's gone through a major loss in their life, it kind of shut down for just a little bit to allow you to grieve, allow you to have that moment to process those things. Then my dad was showing up again in my dreams. And then I noticed my clairvoyant abilities started opening up as I closed my eyes at night. Like I would get images like repeatedly, like so much that I couldn't understand what they were. I couldn't make them out. They would go so fast, but that was a new experience for me. Or being able to be in bed at nighttime. And I, have since learned that's when you're more relaxed, when your guard is down more, so to speak, that I actually see things with my physical eyes.
Same here. I totally know what you mean.
And just those kind of instances. And there was a friend of the family, I guess you would say, that she's a medium, and my family had experience with her, and I kind of was standoffish at first. But all of these experiences, like, okay, I'm ready. Like, I want to hear from my dad. I want to ask about these things that are going on. And as I met with her, it kind of validated all of my experiences, and it brought forward all of these other things that had happened. Because as you start putting your focus on these things, you start remembering all of these things throughout your life that has happened, or these different occurrences or synchronicities. It's like, oh yes, it compounded one after the other, and it just built upon, this is really who you are.
Yeah.
What was interesting is I've had many conversations with friends over the last handful of years, is that I had talked myself so much into, because you weren't born that way, or like you don't remember being a psychic kid, that this isn't these abilities aren't for you. So that first real solid year of that searching physically, reading different things, it was just to confirm for myself that these experiences were valid and that they really were happening to me, and that other people have had these same experiences. And opening that up led to taking the different intensives that were offered in the lab that really helped me get in touch with how my spiritual abilities work for myself, and be able to figure out how I can use them to help other people. And that's kind of where we're here. But here we are. I know that was very short, but that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of.
Well, I love that.
Here.
One of the things I really appreciate, I really thank you for sharing your story, but also that process. I'm so intrigued by the process that, and you may not have recognized it as a process, but what I heard is that, there were some things that really stood out to you, and that really got you interested in searching for more information. And as you were searching for more information, looking to validate, or understand what was going on, that validation in part happened, but also then you started reflecting and understanding and realizing some of the things that happened in your earlier life that you never really thought of in that same way, which to me really represents a shift in perspective, and something that's necessary, I think, in order to keep continuing on this journey. And then you did the videos and things like that, but then you started recognizing, oh, there are some things that fit with my experiences and what I'm hearing. It isn't the way they make it on TV, and that
It's not at all.
No. And I also think that we learn to distinguish ourselves as separate from others who have these experiences. So it's important to unite and see where we fit in and what those similarities are. But then also, and maybe this has happened to you, so I'm asking this question, have you found that as you've continued to search and seek, you're now looking to distinguish your own gifts from those of other people? Like, are there unique aspects to yours that are different than some of the general aspects that we've been taught? And you may or may not have noticed that.
Two things come to mind as you were talking. The first was recognizing that process, but I think that first year it was also coming from, as we all have different backgrounds, it was part of letting go of the fear, because it was always, oh, you need to be careful because you don't know what you're going to invite in. So there was always an apprehension to some of these topics or some of this spiritual work, because you don't know what you're going to invite in. And I'll plug another one of Crystal's videos. Her teaching on Dominion totally allowed me to explore the world of spirit unafraid, because I knew I was in control of that experience. And that's really what helped me to open up to explore more. But when you're asking about like what sets you apart, or that, I'm still figuring that out for myself. I can't put my finger on that. But one of the things that really helped shift my perspective is realizing that everybody's abilities work slightly different for them. One point early on, I had a mentor that I worked one-on-one with, physically, and I didn't realize at that time that things work different. And she would say, okay, we'll do this or do this. But that's not how I work. And I thought I was doing something wrong because I couldn't figure out how to do it, or I didn't see things the way she saw. Needless to say, that relationship didn't last. It ran its course. It didn't last very long, but that was one thing that really helped me. And hopefully anybody who's listening who might be opening to their abilities is realizing that they work for you, and nobody else's abilities work the exact same way. They're all slightly different. We can all say that we're clairvoyant or claircognizant or whatever, or what have you, but they're all slightly different. The way we filter our information is based on our experiences and the way we see the world. So they're always going to be just slightly different. So you can't, now comparison is coming into, like I'm hearing, it's like you can't compare yourself necessarily to another person because we are all so different.
Yes, that has been my experience too. I had to go through that as a process, really. At first I was comparing myself, not even knowing I was doing it, just like hearing other people and how it worked for them. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't really work that way for me. So am I doing it wrong? Just like you had said. And then
or
recognizing,
is it really even happening because that's not my experience?
Yeah.
That was kind of my thought process in the beginning, is like, well, I didn't, have imaginary friends when I was 5 that I can remember, but it just,
the
things didn't happen for me the same way. That was early on. It was, well, that's not happening. You're not this because that's not how you've experienced it. So it's easy to talk yourself out of it.
Oh, for sure. And I think back to those days, when I was like single digits, age-wise, and other people remember certain things, and it's like, well, I wonder if I just thought it was normal and it never really stood out as something, that impacted me so strongly that I carried it through, as I got older.
It's interesting that you say that, because again, I've had conversations with friends about some of these things. Some of these abilities we have are so natural to how we process information. Like for me, claircognizance is one of those things. Like it comes out in the process of a conversation, and you don't realize it's happening until you find out that that's not everybody's experience. The one big eye-opening thing for me was, I've always been able to see visual images when people are describing things. I can see a picture of it in my mind.
Oh, me too.
I know that wasn't normal for everybody. I didn't realize people didn't see things as they were being described by other people. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. I didn't realize that either. I just didn't even think about it. I didn't think that that was something that was happening, that I do it so naturally that it just never stood out to me as being something that not everybody does. Yeah. Well, and, it's funny to me. It's this, I call these no-duh moments for myself, because it's like, I focus a lot on different perceptions that people have, different ways that people think, because a lot of people go into life thinking everybody else thinks the same way they do. And that's oftentimes the cause of a lot of strife and conflict and disappointment. Right. But, I totally get that. And then still didn't, I didn't get to the level of, oh, maybe not everybody visualizes the same way I do. Yet I totally see that showing up in my daughter, who's been doing online school. And I'm not going to talk about her a lot, but other than her learning style is unique, and we've known that, but we haven't really understood it. And some of these things that we're talking about right now with visualizing, I don't think that's really her scene. I think it's more intuitive for her in a lot of ways, and when it doesn't make sense, it's hard for her to understand why. And it's hard, it's like, I think there's a visualization aspect there, but she almost sees the whole and not so much the parts, and it affects how she
And when you
learns.
talk about that, well, like even people who identify as empaths, like I didn't realize what I was feeling in my body or the emotions I could pick up from other people, that not everybody around me could feel the same way. And that there's a difference between empathy and being empathic. I didn't know that. Again, early on, you don't have the vocabulary or the understanding. But when you learn what you know now and then can look back in hindsight, you can be like, oh, I really have been operating this way my whole life.
It's a big plug for reflection, isn't it? Because, when you're in it, and until somebody, I don't know how it worked for you, but for me, I had an experience I didn't understand, and I've had a lot of those around empath especially, and this one in particular, I happened to be in a group of people. We were talking about energetics, which was an actual course I took in college, which was super cool, but I'm like, I don't understand this. I had this really bizarre reaction that really didn't make sense to me, because I kind of knew this person who passed away. I'm there with the family. None of them are crying, but I couldn't stop crying. at all. And I'm just like, they're looking at me like the crazy American. Like, look at her. She can't hold it together. And it's like, well, no, I couldn't. And somebody said, well, maybe you're just, showing the emotions that they weren't able to. And then somebody else said, like, an emotional sponge. And that phrase, emotional sponge, was like, oh my gosh. And then somebody said, oh, that's like an empath. And that was my big thing. And until that time, now I've totally lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Empaths.
How some of these processes are so normal that to us, because they're part of our experience, that we don't realize that they're spiritual abilities or have metaphysical components to them.
Yes. And that to me was like, oh, so not everybody, I didn't even realize I was taking on anybody else's emotions until I started then exploring what empath was, and then recognizing, wow, a lot of this hasn't been mine at all. And that's been a long process. This didn't happen overnight. And I'm sure that's likely the case for a lot of people because there's layers, so many layers.
What's interesting is even I didn't really, I guess I don't know if I would want to say embrace the term empath. Like I knew I could feel things. I knew I could sense emotion. Sometimes I'm a giant walking emotion. I can't help it. It comes up, but I really wasn't able to put my finger on it and identify that, yes, this was really happening until the intuitive intensive of last year of 2019. I was at my day job, and all of a sudden I was just hit with this overwhelming, it was sadness. Like I'm like, you run through your process of, well, is it mine? Am I sad? Like I feel okay. Why am I sad? Well, moments later, my coworker shows up and I have a conversation with her. Let me backtrack. I actually got up, used the restroom, just went through that whole process of trying to like ground and connect and ask, like, is this mine? Is this not mine? I couldn't figure out what it was. And when I got back to the office, my coworker was there, excuse me. And she had mentioned how she'd had a fight with her husband and like all of these emotions were coming up. And I was like, oh, there it is. And I was able to let it go. It wasn't mine anymore, but I was able to pinpoint that. It's like, oh, that's what that is. As I've done other readings in the lab and stuff, I would feel different, either pains or physical sensations in my body that would correlate to the different readings I was giving. And I guess as you have those more experiences, it can actually like pinpoint them. It's easier to identify that these things are actually happening and they're not just like a random ache you're feeling in your body or an emotion that's just coming up that you're holding on to and you don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten to the point where I can start to distinguish. Like a friend of mine sent a text and she sounded like she was down, so I asked her about it and she's like, it's really interesting you picked that up from the tone in my text. And I'm like, oh, well, that was validating, but we're also really close friends and I figure I probably knew even if she didn't send me a text, but the text kind of was like, oh yeah, something's going on. But I also have noticed that I've gotten to the point where I recognize that when I think to my core essence, so to speak, like who I really am when nobody else is around me, when there's nobody else's energy in the mix, and I'm not in my house where there's residual energy from other people in my family, like out in nature or something like that, my core, my default is happy and light and cheerful. And so I'm starting more and more to really focus on that when I do experience confusing feelings, to help me distinguish whether it's mine or not. And I'm also starting to believe that by default, that anything I'm feeling isn't mine until I know it is, because I seem to pick them up so strongly. It's like, that's not mine. And then I can know the truth of, yes, it is, if that happens. But it really doesn't happen that often. Most of the time, it's other people's stuff.
That was something that was an interesting shift for me energetically, is like you open up more to these experiences. I couldn't figure out why all of a sudden I would have issues being in large crowds. Like I did my time in retail. I did my time on Black Friday having to be around a lot of people, and it wasn't an issue. And it was within the last handful of years, it's like, nope, there's too many people. I can't. It would cause me such anxiety. But it's really helped me, like learning how to set those boundaries and really practicing that energetic hygiene and being able to pinpoint what's mine and what's not mine. That really helps me a lot. So hopefully other people will figure that out for themselves. Like when you hear people, like you talk about your struggles early on, and like it gives me such a soft spot in my heart for those same people that are like, I don't know what to do with this, or I'm having these experiences and I don't know what to make of it. It's just like, me too.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's scary to go through. I mean, maybe some people are really excited about that, and I was.
I thought I was going crazy.
Well, I think when I was really young, I had a lot of experiences that I didn't understand, and at some point I decided they were bad or wrong. I don't remember specifics about it, but I have such a strong sense about it that I'm just going to go with that. And,
right.
And then as I got older, I mean, I've always had an attraction to metaphysics, paranormal, Bigfoot, UFOs, all of that. It's like...
I watched every mediumship show, every paranormal show, every ghost hunting show. I read books about it. Like, I was drawn to it my whole life, but afraid of it at the same time.
Yeah. So like they used to have this Friday night movie, and I'm going to date myself by mentioning it, but it was Kolchak the Night Stalker. And I remember sitting in my room, and it was every Friday night, and I turned the lights off, and I don't remember having the TV in my room, but I remember watching this in my room. I'm assuming maybe I made a different story up about it, but it was like, have you ever heard of this show? It's hilarious.
I have not.
I love this show. I think that's available on replay, but it's this guy who's a reporter, right? And he like always wants to get to the bottom of the story. And he works for an editor who's kind of like, whatever. It's just this guy. He's kind of crazy. And all of the stories he investigates have some type of paranormal activity. And nobody believes him until he can prove it. And then almost always he can kind of prove it, but then something happens where the evidence goes away, so nobody believes him again. and the monster dudes are, like calling them monsters because most of the time it had like that dark,
right.
paranormal aspect.
Scary. It was a Friday night.
Yeah. But I loved that show. It would scare me a little bit, but I can say that maybe in part by watching that, nothing really scared me to that as deeply at that and reading a lot of Stephen King novels. But, that I seemed well prepared. And fortunately now, things are much lighter and I really don't hang out in the dark side like that. But it was just, I couldn't get enough of those when I was growing up.
See, that's interesting is I do not like scary movies at all.
I don't anymore.
I don't like scary stories. I don't know. That's just, I have like this whole aversion to them. So I think that's funny.
And I mean, what I found for me at some point, and it's really interesting because it's like, why? I don't like violence. I don't like aggression, like really anger / aggression towards other people, especially women and children. But that really came to light for me once I became a mom. And before that, I could handle it, but I have, it's almost like I'm almost embarrassed to say this because my reaction was to laugh at it, and it was laughing at it as a coping mechanism for not allowing it to affect me. So I wasn't laughing at the people, especially with like scary movies and stuff like that. I'd laugh at the special effects. It's like I found some weird angle that I could make fun of to, I think, make me feel, keep that separation from the emotional pull of what's literally happening in the movie. And then at some point that just stopped. There was no way I could do it anymore. And I'm glad. I don't want that.
When you talk about that, like my first instinct is to be like, don't be embarrassed about that. Do you know how many people use like nervous laughter as a coping mechanism when they're uncomfortable?
Yeah.
So many people would do that and don't realize that that's what they're doing. And it's not anything to do with the situation they're in or what they're experiencing. It's like an subconscious automatic reaction to something that's making them uncomfortable. And it releases some of that uncomfortableness for them.
Tension. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think in addition, one of the things I didn't realize younger when I was from the empath perspective is what a chameleon I was and how I could adapt to pretty much any situation with any people. And that was one of my going along to get along.
Part of your Gemini energy too, just FYI.
For sure. Yes, it is. Yeah, when I read that, it's like, I read that a long time ago, but I'm like, oh, hell, yeah, that's me. You know, the human chameleon. Zelig, a Woody Allen movie, one of my favorites.
you don't even realize you're doing it. Like it just, it's so natural as who it is you are as a person. You're like, oh, I do that.
That's the thing that now I have to act, even now. I mean, it's 10, 12 so years since I recognized that I was an empath, and all of the things that tend to go along with it. But I have to actively manage that. Now, when I go into a situation where there are other people, even if it's online, I have to work to keep my kind of like fill my cup with my own energy, make sure I feel complete before going into those situations, because otherwise I'm at high risk for just saying things that I know other people want to hear versus speaking my truth.
Absolutely. Recovering people pleaser.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I was going to ask you what, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the things you do from an energetic hygiene perspective, or what do you do to establish boundaries and, keep yourself energetically healthy, especially considering some of the work that you do?
Well, like I feel personally called out right now. I am
Sorry.
learning because I do. No, that's a really good question. But boundaries is also something that I am currently working on. I'm just going to say boundaries are something I'm currently working on. And that as a people pleaser, recovering people pleaser, that is something that is very hard for me, because I normally just to keep the peace, or to not, like, it hurts me to think that I've hurt other people. Like, so just to keep the peace, I would just go with the flow, even if it was to my own detriment. And so that's something I'm currently, my birthday is next week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. That is something that I am currently working on for myself. So I'm like, I don't want to make it look like I've got it all together, because I do not. I do not. But working at a special education school, where a lot of our student population do have emotional disabilities, and so you work with the students who have big emotions, and then you work with the adults who are working with those students who have big emotions. So sometimes it is a whirlwind of just a wall of energy that comes and hits you in the face sometimes. And so the things I do is I'll use different crystals I'll have different crystals on my desk. Essential oils have been really helpful for me. I'll keep an energy clearing spray at my desk. But I also, that's something that anybody can do anywhere. Is like if you remove yourself from the situation for just a moment, and you take a walk outside for just a minute, or I do this in the bathroom at work.
I do too.
I take that moment, and I'll take some deep breaths, and I will take an opportunity to ground and connect and come back into my own body. And so then when people come into my office, it's not that wall of energy isn't so overwhelming, and it was actually a lesson to me recently to keep up those practices. One other one I've done that came through in a reading for me from a friend of mine, it was to imagine yourself in this bubble of energy. And when I would do that, this bubble would fill with different colors. Sometimes it would be gold, sometimes it would be blue or green. It just depended on, I guess, what I needed energetically in that moment. But then I would check on that bubble throughout the day, and I could actually see the energy was blacked out or looked darker. So it's that energetic bubble was becoming less and less effective. And so once it got kind of to the top, I would take it off, return it back to Gaia, and then I would start that process over again. And that helped a lot as well. But I kind of got lax in that, having to work from home these last few months and not being around a lot of people. I kind of let those practices slide because I was comfortable in my home. I've curated the energy in this space. So then when you go into a place that's you haven't been a while or interacted with people for a while, I was almost knocked over by their energy. And I was like, okay, it's time to reincorporate those every day again.
Yeah.
I think we get those lessons often. It's we'll let this little practice slide a little bit and see how it goes. And it's oh no, you need to keep doing that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing those. I think it's always really helpful to hear how people do, their own energetic practices, just because maybe something will resonate with other people in the audience. Maybe all of it will resonate with other people in the audience, and offer them some tips on how to do those things as well. I also, the bathroom for me is like, and if I'm out, I don't like to go to public restrooms, especially now, but at the same point, it's a really great way to separate. And you get a little, especially for women, a contained area that
you can have a private moment.
Yep, and nobody can, hassle you. And that I find really important. And it's like how to do that when that isn't available out in public. And like my car is another place for me to, it's like I try really hard to incorporate more transition times. Be after an event in my car, but also before the event in my car, and take a pause and really, center myself, get intentional, fill my cup. I have been practicing with the energetic bubbles like you've talked about. I've been doing those for a really long time, and I've been exploring not using them and allowing energy to run through me, but sometimes that just does not happen. And the bubble is such a great way, especially if it's going to be an environment that has icky energy or some kind of,
gives you a buffer.
Yeah.
I do set that intention when I create it that I don't want to make it like impermeable, but just to only allow things that are in alignment with my highest and greatest good, or things that are important for me to know or feel on a spirit. Those kinds of things can come through, and anything that's lower vibration is not allowed in that bubble. So I always set the intention that it's not impenetrable.
Right.
Because I don't want to shut off that communication.
Yeah, and I think
one thing that I was thinking about, those are the practices that I do during the day, but as we are slowly incorporating more and more social things, that salt baths are that is something that rejuvenates me beyond no measure. Salt baths, making sure that I take that extra time, because I need alone time to recharge. So making sure that I'm meditating, or it's really that time alone, and realizing that when I'm feeling exhausted, it's because I haven't maintained my energetic boundaries, and to not be hard on myself when my body needs extra rest. Those have been kind of big things for me the last little bit. So.
Super important too. And I can say that I am a repeat offender. I seriously, it's the thing, and this kind of goes back to that, the people-pleasing piece and the boundaries, because I am challenged by that too, especially at home with my family, because they're here and they, there's needs, and I want to be an active part in that, but I am also finding more of a need to keep myself healthy physically and energetically. And it's the last thing for me. It's like balancing that, or boosting that as a high priority. And I totally get, there's the whole analogy of like the airplane when, you put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. And that all makes perfect sense, right? But in action,
that's not my natural.
I know. It's like, I think I'd put everybody else's oxygen mask on before mine and just take a big breath of air beforehand and hope I can make it,
I think that comes when you have that heart for service, or that heart to want to help other people. Because that's not my natural instinct either. Ooh, take care of yourself. That's not my go-to. Well, I'm quickly learning that it needs to be.
It does. And that's the whole thing, is getting that theory into practice. And, I've had a lot of time to really work on that, and it's been a challenge, but I totally recognize the benefit of caring for myself first and breaking old patterns. Like even just the past couple of days, I have been working on this thing, and I have this pattern of just pushing through it, right? And so what if I work on it for 10 hours straight with a 10-minute break in between,
Just get it done. Just get it done.
Right.
Yeah, that's you.
But I do think that there are other ways to do it. There are ways that I would prefer to do it, and really being intentional about incorporating that is, well, the next step that I haven't yet achieved, but it's so at the forefront of my mind that I believe I'm there, to put it into action.
One of the things that I heard, and at the moment it escapes who said it, or where it came from. So I apologize for not, crediting the person, but it's we always hear about you can't give from an empty cup, but this change in perspective is that make your cup so full that you give from the excess.
Yeah.
Like over. And that's something that I am currently trying to be mindful of, because I'll run myself into the ground trying to help everybody else. I will get to a point where I'm so depleted, my body literally makes me take a break. And that's not a good way to operate.
No.
You know?
It's not fun either.
No, it's not. It's not.
Well, we have 6 minutes left.
Wow, that went really fast.
I know. I told you it was going to do that. That's what happens. Things just flow quickly. But I'm wondering, is there anything else you'd like to add or suggest, or what, or just conclude with before we say so long?
I would, and like I can already feel the emotion right here. Oh. So this whole conversation, talking about spiritual journeys or these different experiences that we have, something that has really profoundly changed me the last few years is giving myself permission to say yes. Giving myself that permission to explore the possibility of these things that were happening for me. And I got it was the other day, sometimes, when we're doing these mundane tasks, like Spirit likes to slip in these little like nuggets of wisdom. And I've currently written it on my mirror, and it was, freedom can be found when you give yourself the permission to be who it is that you truly are.
Oh.
And I just want to, gonna cry. I just want to share that with people, that give yourself the permission to be who it is that you are, and watch how your life can be profoundly changed. That's what I want to share.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. I may actually make a little clip of that because it's such a great and important sentiment. Permission it almost should have been my word over the past 10 months or so about.
You don't realize that you need to give yourself that permission.
Yeah.
We seek so much of this external validation that things really can't change or transform until you give yourself the permission to say yes.
Yes.
And something that has really made a difference for me.
Me too. Wow. Well, thank you, Amy, for sharing your story and your experiences and your insights and perspectives. I just so appreciate it. It's been such a joy to get to know you better as well.
I've loved it. Thank you so much for this beautiful opportunity.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm going to try. Something weird has happened. Here we go. That might do it. Okay, there. I'm putting Amy's details up again. I had a weird little tech thing. I'm noticing a couple of tech things, but really, really minor, so I'm happy to say that.
That's good.
But here are Amy's deets if you'd like to reach out. Remember that she's offering 10% off of her services with the code capital LAB and then 10.
That I did want to tell you, that Oracle card, like I could feel so much of, talking about friendship and, connection, and that's me. That's what I value so much. And I guess my last little tidbit is find those spiritual communities, find those people that see you for you, and watch how you can make connections with people on a soul level. That's my last little nugget, because that's what I've been blessed with these last few years, is people who really see me.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Well,
you're welcome.
We'll just conclude with that because that was amazing. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Thank you again, Amy, for being here. I wish all of you a magical, mystical day, weekend, and, life ahead. All right, take care, everybody.